Judge Harold Washington had always believed that retirement would bring him peace. After 37 years on the federal bench, he looked forward to quiet mornings in his garden, afternoon walks through his neighborhood, and evenings reading the novels he'd never had time for during his demanding career. At 72, Harold moved with the measured pace of a man who had learned that life's most important moments often required patience and careful consideration. His silver beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made him one of the most respected jurists in the district. The trouble began on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Harold was tending to his roses when he noticed the moving truck across the street. A young family was settling into the old Peterson house, a father with sleeve tattoos, a mother with bleached blonde hair, and two teenage boys who looked like they spent more time at the gym than in school. Over the following weeks, Harold noticed small things. The family's garbage cans were often overturned, spilling trash across the sidewalk. Their music played late into the night. But it was the looks, the cold stares whenever he walked past, that told him everything he needed to know. The first direct confrontation came on a Saturday afternoon. Harold was walking to the corner store when he heard footsteps behind him. The two teenage boys from across the street flanked him on either side. "Hey, old man," the taller one said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't belong in this neighborhood anymore." Harold continued walking, his expression unchanged. "This is a public sidewalk, son." "Not for your kind," the shorter boy sneered. "Maybe you should find somewhere else to take your walks." Harold stopped and turned to face them both. His voice remained calm, measured. "And what kind would that be?" The boys exchanged glances, emboldened by what they mistook for weakness. The taller one stepped closer. "You know exactly what I mean, old man. This used to be a good neighborhood before people like you moved in." "I see." Harold nodded slowly. "Well, I've lived here for 15 years. I suppose I've grown rather attached to the place." 15 years too long, the boy spat. Harold studied their faces, young, angry, full of a hatred they'd been taught rather than learned. He thought of all the young defendants who had stood before his bench over the years, how many of them had started down a dark path with exactly this kind of thinking. "You boys have a good day," Harold said finally, continuing toward the store, but it didn't end there. Over the next month, the harassment escalated. His mailbox was knocked over twice. Someone spray-painted a racial slur on his fence. His garden hose was cut. Each incident was reported to the police, who took statements with the weary efficiency of officers who had seen it all before. The breaking point came on a warm Thursday evening. Harold was watering his roses when he heard the familiar voices approaching. This time, it wasn't just the two boys. Their father had joined them, along with two other men Harold didn't recognize. "There he is," the father said, his voice thick with alcohol and malice. "The old man who thinks he owns the neighborhood." Harold turned off his hose and faced the group. 5 men against one elderly man. The mathematics of intimidation. "Gentlemen," Harold said quietly. "Can I help you with something?" "Yeah, you can help us," the father slurred. "You can pack up your shit and get out of our neighborhood. We don't want your kind here." "My kind?" "You know damn well what I mean." The man stepped onto Harold's property, crossing the line literally and figuratively. "This is a white neighborhood. Always has been, always should be." Harold set down his hose carefully. "I'm afraid you're mistaken about several things. First, this is not your neighborhood. Second, I have as much right to be here as anyone else. And third." He paused, his voice taking on the authority that had once commanded one of the most prestigious courtrooms in the country. "You are currently trespassing on my property." The man laughed, a ugly sound. "Trespassing? What are you going to do about it, old man? Call the police? They don't care about people like you." "Perhaps," Harold said. "But I suspect they might care about people like me more than you think." Something in Harold's tone gave the man pause, but he was too far gone to back down now. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all. I'm simply observing that your assumptions about me, and about this situation, may be incorrect." One of the teenage boys picked up a rock from Harold's garden border. "Maybe we should teach this old man some respect." "Put that down, son," Harold said, his voice cutting through the evening air with quiet authority. Something about the way he said it, the tone, the presence, the absolute lack of fear, made the boy hesitate. When Harold's neighbor, Mrs. Chin, came hurrying across the street with her phone in her hand. "Judge Washington," she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "I've called the police. They're on their way." The word judge hit the group like a physical blow. The father's face went pale. "Judge?" Harold nodded slowly. "Retired federal Judge Harold Washington, Eastern District. And you are standing on my property, making threats, while your son holds what could be considered a weapon." The rock dropped from the boy's hand as if it had caught fire. "I..." the father stammered. Let me help you understand your situation, Harold continued, his voice taking on the cadence he'd used for thousands of sentencing hearings. You have committed multiple acts of vandalism and harassment over the past month, all of which have been documented and reported. Tonight, you have escalated to trespassing and making threats while intoxicated. Your son was preparing to commit assault with a deadly weapon. The group of 5 men suddenly looked very small. Now, Harold said, I have spent my career believing in second chances. I have seen young men like your son stand before my bench, and I have seen what happens when they continue down the path they're on. Some learn from their mistakes. Others do not. Police sirens could be heard in the distance now. I'm going to make you an offer, Harold continued. You can leave my property now, return to your homes, and spend some time reflecting on the choices that brought you here tonight. I will tell the officers that this was a misunderstanding, and we can all move forward. And if we don't, one of the other men asked. Harold's smile was thin but not unkind. Then I will explain to the officers exactly what has transpired here, and you can explain to your employers, your families, and eventually a judge why you thought it was appropriate to harass and threaten a 72-year-old man because of the color of his skin. The police cars rounded the corner, their lights painting the evening in alternating red and blue. The father looked at his sons, then at Harold. The hate was still there, but it was tempered now by fear and the dawning realization of consequences. We were just. He started. You were just leaving, Harold said firmly. The group began to back away from his property. As the police cars pulled up, Harold walked over to meet the officers, 2 of whom recognized him immediately. Evening, Your Honor, the senior officer said. Everything all right here? Harold looked back at the group of men, now huddled together across the street, their bravado completely evaporated. Just a misunderstanding, Officer Martinez. I believe it's been resolved. Officer Martinez looked skeptical but nodded. You sure about that, Judge? I am. But perhaps you could have a word with my neighbors about the importance of community respect and following local ordinances? Absolutely, sir. As the officers walked across the street to speak with the group, Mrs. Chen approached Harold. Are you really going to let them off? She asked. Harold watched as the father tried to explain himself to the unimpressed officers. Mrs. Chen, I sent a lot of young men to prison during my career. Some deserved it. Some didn't learn any other way. But I always believed that the law works best when it teaches rather than merely punishes. And you think they've learned? Harold considered this. The father has learned that actions have consequences. The boys have learned that the elderly man they were tormenting is not as powerless as they assumed. Whether they learn the deeper lesson, that hate diminishes the person who carries it more than its target, remains to be seen. Over the following weeks, the neighborhood settled into an uneasy peace. The harassment stopped entirely. The family across the street avoided eye contact when they passed Harold on his walks, but there were no more confrontations. Then, on a Saturday morning in late spring, Harold was working in his garden when he noticed someone approaching. It was the younger of the 2 boys. Walking slowly and alone, Harold continued pruning his roses, but kept his peripheral vision on the approaching figure. Judge Washington, the boy called out when he reached the edge of the property. Harold turned to face him. Up close, without the bravado and group support, the boy looked very young indeed. Maybe 16, with uncertain eyes and nervous hands. Yes? I wanted to apologize. For what we did. What I did. Harold set down his pruning shears and gave the boy his full attention. I'm listening. My dad, he teaches us things. About people. About how the world works. But after that night, after I found out who you were, I looked you up online. The boy's voice was barely above a whisper. You sent my older brother's friend to prison 2 years ago. Drug dealing. But you also gave him a chance to turn his life around. He's in college now. Harold nodded slowly. I remember. Marcus Williams. Bright young man who made some poor choices. Yeah. And I realized, maybe the things my dad taught me aren't right. Maybe the person I was becoming isn't who I want to be. Harold studied the young man's face, seeing not the sneering bully from months before, but a confused teenager wrestling with inherited hate and emerging conscience. That's a difficult realization to come to, Harold said gently. What will you do with it? The boy shrugged, suddenly looking even younger. I don't know. It's hard, you know? At home, with my friends, this is how everyone thinks. Change is never easy, Harold acknowledged. Especially when it means standing apart from the crowd. But every person has to decide who they want to be in this world. Not who their parents want them to be, not who their friends expect them to be, but who they choose to be. They stood in silence for a moment, the old judge and the young man, separated by decades and experience but connected by this moment of honest conversation. Could I The boy started, then stopped. Could I maybe help you with your garden sometime? I mean, if you want. I know about plants. My grandmother taught me before she died. Harold considered this carefully. Trust, once broken, required time to rebuild. But redemption required opportunity. What's your name, son? Tyler. Tyler Morrison. Well, Tyler Morrison, I could use some help with the vegetable garden in the back. These old knees aren't what they used to be. But I should warn you, I'm a demanding supervisor, and I don't tolerate half-hearted work. Tyler's smile was the first genuine expression Harold had seen from him. Yes, sir. I understand. Saturday mornings, 8 o'clock sharp. We'll start next week. As Tyler walked away, Harold returned to his roses, thinking about the long arc of justice and the possibility of redemption. Change was slow, often painful, and never guaranteed. But it was possible. That evening, as Harold sat on his porch reading, he noticed Tyler's father standing in his own front yard, watching his son help Mrs. Chin carry groceries from her car. The man's expression was unreadable, but Harold thought he detected something that might have been confusion, or even the beginning of reconsideration. Real change, Harold knew, happened one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one choice at a time. It was the work of a lifetime, whether on the bench or off it. The sun set over the quiet neighborhood. Harold Washington smiled and turned the page of his book, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring.